to Watchung Booksellers. We have been here in the community for over 30 years, thanks to all of you keeping us going and to having such a wonderful roster of authors in town. So, Cyndie. Cyndie is a born storyteller turned writer, and she's an aspirational voice and a igniter of powerful conversation around self-acceptance, integrity, and joy. And she is a former fashion executive, an adjunct professor at Parsons School of Design and Fashion Institute of Technology, and she holds Masters of Professional Studies. She is also a TEDx speaker and a certified yoga and meditation teacher. Her honest storytelling, vulnerable self-inquiry, and penchant for swear words have made her a sought-after speaker for conferences and organizations. And she is the founder of Dear Gown Ass Women. Grown Ass. Oh my God. I'm thinking of your pink gown on your launch photo. Sorry, that's Grown Ass Women. An inclusive and highly relatable social community for women 35 and plus. And she is also the author of A Year of Positive Thinking. But tonight she's here to launch her book, Microjoys, and we're thrilled. And in conversation with Cyndie is Henry Neff, also one of our Montclair authors, who is a middle reader author, but is currently writing an adult book.
Not erotica, just for older readers.
My age. So he's the author and illustrator, really like magnificent illustrations of 6 fantasy novels, including the 5-book Tapestry series and Imperium. And his books have been translated into 20 languages and received critical acclaim, such as the Texas Bluebonnet and Lone Star Awards, Missouri Truman Award, and Entertainment Weekly's Middle Grade Book of the Year. His first book for adults, The Witchstone, will be out next year, so we'll all be back together for that. Former teacher and consultant, Henry lives right here in Montclair with his wife, who has the fabulous pink shoes on tonight, and 2 children. So thank you so much for coming tonight and for helping to make this happen and bringing so many people in. And now we'd love to hear all about Microjoys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Morgan. Can everybody hear me okay? So I am delighted to be here, and it's, I just learned a valuable lesson, though, not to have your biography follow Cyndie's biography, because as we know, many of you, I think, who have met Cyndie before, we are sitting here with a rock star. And I've had the privilege of knowing Cyndie now, I guess, for a couple of months in town, just crossing paths, and we talk shop and we talk about books. A year, I don't know. It's the pandemic. We've all lost track of time. But I am absolutely delighted to be here with you and to have the privilege of sitting here with Cyndie and talking about this remarkable book. So if you haven't already dived into Microjoys, it's a collection of 48 essays that detail Cyndie's journey throughout her life, but also really focused on the last couple of years. And it's a remarkable journey reading this book, and I really found that it resonated on so many levels. And so, without further ado, if it's okay with you, I prepared sort of too many questions, so I'm going to try to curate. But one of the first things that I was curious about Cyndie was that as a writer myself, I am of the opinion that typically when you're working on a project or you're pouring so much of your blood, sweat, and tears into something at a given point in time, it typically has something to do with something that's happening in your life or something that's happening in the times in which we live. And Microjoys struck me as a book that probably falls in that category in some way. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about what prompted this book and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, thank you for that. We met a year ago, just to be clear. So 2020 rolled around, and by the way, some of my neighbors are here who didn't know any of this, so I think they might be hearing it for the first time too. But 2020, we moved to Montclair. We were in the middle of a pandemic. We moved from Brooklyn to Montclair in May of 2020, the week that George Floyd was murdered. My 32-year-old nephew was murdered. So it became very real. Like Black Lives Matter finally made the public stage, but it was very, very personal 4 months after that, right after having moved to Montclair, my beloved mother passed away. I talk a lot about her, Mama Shelley. She passed away within 4 months unexpectedly. Within a month of my mother's passing, Erin, I like your socks. Within a month of my mother's passing, my 48-year-old brother had a stroke, and he then went into cardiac arrest, where he spent the next 2.5 months in the ICU. So generally, when one is in the ICU, it's for a week or 2 weeks, not 10, and not during a pandemic. So my brother, my oldest brother and I, who had just lost his son, and we lost our mother, were then calling up to the hospital 3 times a day to ensure that my brother was okay. By the grace of God, he made it home, and within a month of my brother making it home, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which I haven't talked about publicly because I didn't want that to be a narrative that got taken away from me. And I think once you say that, folks lay claim to it, and they have their own stories that they attach to it. And so really this book is the first time that most people are hearing that. But prior to all of that, in 2018, I wrote a book called A Year of Positive Thinking. So I was known as sort of being sassy and positive, and when I was in the middle of all of this, I could not think positively about anything. I didn't want to find a silver lining. I just wanted to grieve. We had just moved to Montclair. I wanted to hide in my apartment with my mom's plants and my cute husband and just sort of figure out what the hell just happened to my life. But that is what led to Microjoys, because as an optimist, it was the only way that I'd really known how to walk through the world. And so slowly, though I wasn't going to try to think positively, I would just find that I was looking for these small moments within everything else that was happening, those moments that would allow me to really be okay with each day. So those are the things I called Microjoys on social media, and they stuck.
And that's a lot of fodder to write a book, and thank you for sharing that with us. I know it's probably difficult to share some of those things, and I appreciate you doing that. One of the things that really struck me when I was reading through the essays, because some of them are looking back in time and things throughout your life, and other things are more contemporary and things that have happened sort of over the pandemic. But one of my favorite stories that I encountered, and that really sort of triggered a lot of thinking on my part, was the essay in which you take an impromptu trip to India when you were feeling, I guess, somewhat stagnant and maybe a little bit of a crossroads and needed some change, and you phoned up a professor who invited you to just hop on a plane and head on over. And as I read this essay, I was thinking, how badass is that you just did that? And also, I don't know if I could have done that. And so one of the things that really resonated with me was your openness to new experiences. And I was really curious if that's something that you have had all of your life, or if that is a conscious decision that you made in your approach to life.
Yeah, so that essay is called Seema's Chai, or something along those lines. Did I have that all of my life? I think so. I think that, so I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. We grew up with very little, and I knew from a young age that if I wanted to see or do things, I would have to leave to go do those things. And so when I was 19 and started school in Manhattan, for me it was very natural to simply try everything. It was kind of like if you don't have something, or if you're not allowed to have sugar and all of a sudden there's a buffet filled with sugar, you want to try all of it. And so it became very natural for me at some of the most pivotal times in my own life to try new things and to not be afraid to try new things. And at the time I was working in the fashion industry, and I was traveling across the world. You know, I went from not getting on a plane until I was 21 to traveling to China, a few times a year. It just became standard for me to hop on planes, to do things, to not be uncomfortable being uncomfortable. If I wanted to see the world, I would have to get out and see the world, and I didn't necessarily want to wait for anybody else to do it with me. And I think those actions sort of showed up in big ways and small, but it's sort of the way I've been for a very long time.
And so as somebody who tends to be very set in his ways and have a routine and is 49 going on 89, what tips would you have for people who find it harder? Do you have a tip or something, a suggestion for people to kind of break out of their patterns, especially I feel like in the aftermath of the pandemic when so many people were closed up in their homes or their apartments and, not able to experience as many new things.
Yeah, you're not going on 80.
89.
50. Come on, 89, right. So the first thing I feel like I need to say is many of these, I don't have children. I'm 45 with no children. My husband, do you have any kids? No, neither of us have any kids. So, there is a certain privilege and ability to get up and go when you don't have any other responsibilities except for cats, which our neighbors are very nice to watch for us when we leave. Look, the suggestion isn't that everybody get on a plane and go to India, right? Do whatever it is. But, one of the things that I'll often say is do what is uncomfortable to you in a way that you can manage in that moment. So if you always go to the same cafe, go to a different cafe. If you always walk the same way, take a different walk. You don't have to jump on a plane and go to India unless you want to, and then I highly recommend you do it. But sometimes it's just a matter of breaking out of a lot of the small habits that we have, because those habits become ingrained in us, right? When we're used to doing the same thing day in and day out, we continue to do them. And then we look back and we say, shit, I'm 49 going on 89. And, I've been going to the same coffee shop, which I know is not true for you because we needed all kinds of coffee shops.
We do.
So change small habits.
So little changes, little things can make big differences over time is
eventually.
what I'm taking away from that.
Yes.
And so speaking of Ira, your lovely husband, handsome husband who has no children.
That I'm aware of.
So another one of my favorite sort of vignettes from the book are these, you talk about getting these piggy banks, this lovely glass piggy bank that you brought home, and then you sort of started to, I guess, adopt certain practices. And as I was reading through the book, the piggy banks really, stuck out to me as kind of emblematic in some ways of your approach to life and finding microjoys, even on a day-to-day basis, and things paying off over time. Could you tell everybody a little bit about the piggy banks and how they've become part of your daily practice?
Yeah. So the glass piggy banks, which I actually considered bringing one, but Henry and I talked about it the other day, and I thought I shouldn't take that from you all. I should let you envision them for yourselves. I was on a business trip in Utah. I was speaking at a conference, and I found this beautiful little glass piggy bank. It's only about this big. If I'm going to describe it, I guess I could have brought it with me. It's a small glass piggy bank, and I didn't have a reason to buy it. I had no one that I was buying it for, but I just loved it, and I thought, if this doesn't break by the time I get back to New York, it is meant to be. It didn't break. I put it on a shelf, and I intended to give it to someone at some point, but I just kept finding money. And then I started, doing this disgusting thing that no one should do, which is, if I found money in a puddle, I would reach for it. Don't do this. I think you can get COVID that way. I don't know. But really, it was just found money. It would be like a penny here or a nickel on a subway seat. You also shouldn't touch money on a subway seat. But all of this money, it just felt like it kept appearing. Now, of course, it wasn't appearing, right? I was just noticing it. And because the piggy bank was glass, the more I put into the piggy bank, the more I started to notice was accruing. I found $20 in an elevator, which I feel like I might have stolen, but no one asked for it back. So eventually the piggy bank was filled with money, and all of it was found money. And what ended up happening was it sort of became this very visual way of seeing abundance in the world. And I know some of you are like, really, Cyndie, did you just say that? I did. But it really became this very tangible way of seeing what was already around us, which is ultimately what a microjoy is, right? It doesn't take away life as it is, but it allows you to see things differently, and that's what this glass piggy bank did. It filled up over the course of a year, and so then I went on Amazon and bought another one. I guess it wasn't that special because they had it on Amazon. So now we have 2 full glass piggy banks.
Well, it's, so to piggyback.
Nice.
That was good. My son gave me a book of dad jokes for Christmas this past year, and they're paying off. But to piggyback off that, so, you talk about using the piggy banks as a way of noticing things. And I did find sort of a common theme when I was reading through the book that a lot of microjoys and sort of, finding things, even when things are difficult on a day-to-day basis, so much of it is dependent on being present in the moment and really being present and really being here now. And just raising 2 kids, seeing them with their devices, myself being sort of shamelessly addicted to my smartphone. How do we, in an age where things are so busy and we're constantly being bombarded with news and notifications, how do you manage to stay present when you're a busy woman, you have a business, you're writing books, but how do you find the time to actually tune out the noise?
I think my neighbor could attest to the fact that I'm not very busy, and I'm home all the time. So one of the ways, though, that I find myself being present is putting my phone in the other room. So I do this slightly creepy thing, which is I open the blinds in my apartment, I sit in the corner chair, I set the timer on my phone for 5 minutes. I know, I told you, creepy. And I put the phone in the other room, it's close enough that I can hear when the timer goes off, but not that I can scroll Instagram. So what it does is it forces me to look at what's around that I've seen, a million times before, but to see it through a different lens. Because every time I look at something, every time any of us looks at something, we see it through the lens of everything we have going on in our lives at that time, right? So there are crocus coming up in the front yard. There are, I've sort of inadvertently trained myself to be hyper present when I need to be, because truthfully, we can't go through the world that way. If we were hyper present all the time, we would never get anything done. So there has to be these moments. We have to know how to use that skill. And for me, it starts with just 5 minutes a day, which again, I feel like this is a recipe. It's not. It's just try a few minutes that work for you, but do not have your phone or your devices nearby. And something that I find is really useful, use as many senses as are available to you, right? So I sit in the corner and say, what can I see? And I'll actually say out loud. Again, creepy because I'm home alone. Tom, can you ever hear that? Yeah. But really, it's like, what do I see right now? I see a box. I see this. I see that. What do I hear right now? What do I smell right now? What do I taste right now? What do I touch right now? And you can say these things out loud. You don't have to. But if you do, it really sort of brings you right into the present moment because you start to notice things differently. And so I find that that's a very easy way of trying this hyper-focus.
So 5 minutes, put the phone away, multi-sensory observations of the world around us. I can do that. I'm going to try that, baby steps.
Yes, baby
That
steps.
sounds good for me.
And you made it sound fancy. Multi-sensory. What did you
Oh,
just
yeah,
say?
that sounds good, right?
Very fancy, y'all. Very
Jargony
fancy.
kind
Yeah.
of term.
Multi-sensory experience.
So another thing that I loved when reading the book was, you talk a little bit about treating yourself now and then and doing things sort of just because, right? So whether it's I'm going to meet this friend and I'm going to have a glass of wine, or I'm going to buy this sort of fun summer dress, or I'm going to just sort of have this experience just because it's Tuesday or just because. And it's a really sort of lovely approach to life, I thought. But as I was looking at it, I was like, that really sort of presumes 2 things in the person that's doing it, right? A sense of spontaneity,
Right.
and also, though, a sense of self-worth, that, you deserve this, right? That you can, I don't know if it's necessarily an indulgence, but that you deserve this in this moment. And I was curious if you think that spontaneity and a sense of self-worth are vital ingredients to happiness.
I can't speak for everybody's happiness, but what I will say is that as adults, we become less and less spontaneous, right? Again, we get caught in these ruts where we do the same thing day in and day out, and very rarely do we drop everything to say, you know what, I'm going to go do this thing. And so I don't know that spontaneity is the key to somebody else's happiness, but I can say that for me, it has allowed me some really cool opportunities that otherwise I could have easily said no to, whether it's a trip to India, whatever it is. The ability to be spontaneous when a friend calls and says, hey, do you want to go grab a glass of wine? Do you want to grab coffee? Saying yes, that conversation, and you actually showing up to meet them can lead to many other things. So I think spontaneity can look different to different folks, but it is important to allow ourselves to say yes to opportunities when they come up so that we don't get caught in this consistent rut. Are you mad? Why are you looking at me like that? Yeah, you look mad. You know mad? I was just checking, just to check over here. You sure?
I'm just looking at what you're saying.
Because you're into it?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So summer dresses and glasses of wine, these are wonderful things, right?
You like summer dresses?
I do like summer dresses. I've never purchased one for myself, or frankly for anybody
Could
else,
happen.
but they are delightful. But you know, the book deals with some challenging things too.
Yeah.
And really it sort of seems like this book came about as a byproduct of you processing some challenging things that caused you to reflect on stuff way in the past and then things that you were experiencing in the moment. And one of the things that really struck a chord with me when I was reading was your approach to managing relationships. And you've always, you know, from the moment we met, you've always struck weeks, several days ago. You have struck me as a very decisive person, and a person who knows who you are and has sort of defined the terms on which you engage with life. And it's something that I admired right away, and I would love to sort of incorporate more into my own life. And so in the book, you talk a little bit about, you know, you had a longtime friend who suddenly just sort of dropped off the map and stopped speaking with you. You also talk about your father, who was, you know, a challenging and I guess at times unsteady presence.
Rolling stone.
A rolling stone, an
Yes.
unsteady presence in your life.
Yeah.
And you had very different approaches to each of these situations. So in one, you know, there was sort of a degree of acceptance and moving on. Yeah. And in the other, there was unconditional forgiveness. And I was really curious about your capacity to do both of these things and how you decide which approach to kind of take given the situation. And if you have any suggestions for, you know, all of us, everybody here probably has a problematic relationship or something that they would like to perceive more clearly. And if you have suggestions, or where do you think a lot of us go wrong when it comes to managing problematic relationships? Because you seem to have a good handle on it.
So I would never tell anybody else where they go wrong. I don't know where everybody goes wrong, but what I can say is I have nurtured discernment. And what I mean by that is I know when a relationship is worth pursuing, and I know when it's not. And with my father, right, he was going to be my father no matter what. So the relationship with my father wasn't about, the forgiveness, I suppose, wasn't really for him, right? The forgiveness was for me. I could choose to move through the world and be angry at him for something that in that moment he couldn't change, or I could just forgive him and move on. And it was a choice, right? But these things, I say them casually, but I've done a lot of self-work. You know, I thank my therapist in the back of the book. She's been my therapist for 15 years. And at this point, she doesn't even charge me anymore. She just calls me and we talk, and her husband walks around naked in the back. It's very interesting. It's a true story. Yeah, 100%. But I feel like I can't say anything because I'm not paying her. So here we are. But all of that to say that it's a true story. Her name is Susan. I lost my train of thought. I should not joke. Oh, so discernment, right? I think the situation with my friend, we had been friends since college. She was in my wedding. Like, she was the person that I thought was going to be my ride or die. She'd always been there. And in the midst of everything, she just disappeared. And what I came to find out, my mom's dead, my nephew's dead, I've kept, all of these things, what I came to find out is that is not uncommon. That when we are grieving and going through really difficult things, sometimes the people we love the most cannot do it with us. And so that was really hard for me because she was my person, you know? I think my friends are angrier than I am at this point. But what I came to understand is, by the way, I still have not forgiven her. I'm not ready, right? So forgiveness is not a thing I throw out willy-nilly and say, you get forgiveness, I'm not Oprah. Like when I want to, I'll give it. When I feel like I can let it go, I will. But what I did do was accept it, right? I don't look at my phone thinking she's gonna call. I think I unblocked her number because I did block it for a little while. But I just accepted it because so many other things were going on that it wasn't something that I could focus on. And understanding over time that this is not uncommon was actually a lot of solace for me. It gave me a lot of solace because this happens. And the other lesson that I walked away from that relationship knowing was that her walking away didn't make our relationship any less valuable. You know, like she wasn't a bad friend for the entire time that we were friends, but this is something that she could not move through with me. And I've come to really believe that that was not about me. That was about her. And so I could choose not to accept it, but who's carrying the weight of that? Not her.
Right.
You know, and so I think it's just been years of discernment. I've really nurtured a relationship with myself to say these are the boundaries and parameters of this relationship. You good with that, Cyndie? Good. You're good with it? Then continue a relationship. So I don't walk through the world cutting people out or hoping that people leave, but I'm very clear on what my boundaries are. And I think that for other folks, you know, again, I'm not going to judge how or why you stay in the relationships you do, but I would certainly question if they make you feel badly about yourself in any way, then why are you in them? Because you don't have to be in relationships forever for them to be good relationships. Now, please don't walk out of here and start getting divorces and breaking up with all your friends, because it's normal, right? We're going to go through difficult times, but I think we know as adults when something just doesn't feel right, and when we're hanging on to something that doesn't feel right. So I think build a community around you that will be honest with you and nurture that discernment within yourself so that you can make the difficult decisions when you have to.
So I think that is excellent advice and something that I am going to try to practice. And one of the nice things about this book is that it has all kinds of excellent advice. And it's not, one of the things I appreciated about it is that it's not dogmatic. So it's not preachy at all. In fact, so each chapter or essay is paired with a little thing at the end that says, consider this, right? Consider this. And in which you sort of toss out an idea for somebody to consider, or perhaps adopt in their own life, or I guess incorporate in some way. And so, you know, there are 48 chapters. There are 48 consider this is, I guess.
What is it? What's it?
This is, what's the consider these, consider the 48 of them. There are 48 consider this pieces of advice.
Consider this is?
Consider this
these
is. It's an awkward phrase.
Joe, how do we say this?
Consider these.
Thank
Consider
you.
these.
English
there we
teacher.
go. So, out of those 48, if you could wave a magic wand,
yes,
and you know that would sort of enable everybody here to make a regular practice of this particular, you know, approach or way of framing things or a daily practice, which one do you think would be the most helpful for most people?
I think, that's a hard question, but one of the, now I want to say theses. Joe. Thesis? Theses? Theses. The theses of the book is about impermanence. Everything in life is impermanent. Hi, Michelle. Nice for you to join us. What time is it? She's a friend. I'm kidding, everyone. But impermanence, right? And I talk a lot. I know. It's okay. I talk a lot about this, right? This idea that this too shall pass. Everything is impermanent. And that goes from the highest of highs to the most spectacular moments to sitting here with all of you around me for signing books to the loss of my mom. Right? Like everything is temporary. And when we realize that, we pay closer attention, we care more closely, we hold our people more tightly. But just that constant reminder, I have a Post-it that I move it around. Sometimes it's on the bathroom, sometimes it's in the office, and it just says, this too shall pass, because it is a reminder to me that if something is bothering me in that moment, it's temporary. If something is brilliant in that moment, it's temporary, because when we cling to those brilliant moments, our ego also gets in the way, and then we start to believe that we are that thing, right? Like, I am this author that gets to sign books. It's like, yeah, sure, sometimes. But, you know, talk to me in 6 months, and I'll be in my apartment talking to myself with Tom listening again. So it's like everything is temporary, and the more we can remind ourselves of that, the more we yeah, I think that the more we value what we have.
Well, we could not have planned that any better because I don't want to hog all the time and I want to give people an opportunity to ask questions. But before I segue to that, I did want to read a little passage from the book that Cyndie did not know I was going to read. So one of the things that I really enjoyed is just as a writer myself, I really appreciate language and when people use language well. And Cyndie is a beautiful writer. And so I wanted to share my favorite passage from the book, and then we will open it up to questions from the audience.
That's so sweet.
So, as cliche as this may sound, I can say with full confidence that all we truly have is this exact moment. And when our time comes, or that of our loved ones, to leave this world behind, nothing else will matter. Not that new car, fancy promotion, publishing a bestseller, or being the coolest kid on the block. Nothing else will matter. You will break down and fall apart at the seams. Life will cloud over and never be as bright again. You will unlearn everything about yourself that you once thought was true. You will feel like you are walking through molasses. You will forget who you were and barely recognize yourself, except for pictures taken from the times before. But, with each day that passes, you will pick up those teeny, tiny shards of the life you used to know. You will heal, and some days will move you forward, while others shift you 10 steps backward. And though you will never be the same, as the art of kintsukuroi teaches us, you may become just a bit more resilient, courageous, and beautiful because you were broken. And I think that that is such a beautiful sentiment and so beautifully expressed. And so here we are, we're having this moment together. We're right here, right now. And with that, to fully appreciate this, I'd love to open it up for questions from the audience for Cyndie.
Thank you for Can I just say this before we do that piece of it? We talked about questions. He had them really organized. And I was like, yeah, just bring the paper with you. And he's like, absolutely not. All of this, no paper, no notes, nothing. He refused to bring notes. How brilliant was he? So good. Well, I was on the Today Show last week and had notes with me. It was in my book, literally sitting in my lap, just in case Al Roker asked me something and I didn't know the answer. So really, well done you. Well done you.
Thank you. Well, if anybody would like to ask some questions, we would love to hear them. And should we pass around?
Yeah. Anybody?
Do you want my mic?
I can talk.
Okay.
First of all, this is so inspiring. Thank you.
I'm gonna pass it to you just so they can hear too.
Thank you.
I'm so curious what you think about Instagram. Because arguably Instagram people are putting their best or a certain version of themselves forward, and some of those versions, especially after listening to you, can often be perceived as microjoys. Like, here's my cocktail, here's the sunset, here's like my vacation, and it has a lot of problems, all of that positivity, and we read about young women feeling terrible about themselves and all the pressures. And so I'm curious if you think Instagram is, when it comes to microjoys, like, is it a good venue? Is it helping us? Is it hurting us? Like, how do you think about social media and microjoys and the two things together?
I hate it. No, I'm just kidding. No. I'm kidding. I love Instagram. I'm on Instagram. I love Instagram. You know, I'm going to use that word I used before, which is discernment. When using Instagram, we have to understand that we are looking at someone's highlight reel. No one is putting the garbage on Instagram. I mean, some accounts do, but for the most part, we're showing the best parts of our lives. And so as adults, we have to be mindful when we are consuming social media that you are not looking at that person's life. You're looking at their highlight reel. And so we don't want to compare ourselves to anyone else's highlight reel. So I think you have to know yourself enough to know if that's something you can discern. So I will delete the app from my phone once a month because my discernment's real low and I forget, and then I start to compare myself. But that's a practice that I have, right? At this point, I don't know how long I've been on Instagram, but I've learned enough about my relationship to social media to know when it feels off, when it feels skewed, when I need to start unfollowing people, you know, when sort of like I was saying about relationships, when I'm starting to feel more negative things than I am positive things. And sometimes you have to pause people when it comes to Instagram and think about, what is it that I want to surround myself with right now? You know, do I want to surround myself with learning things? Do I want to surround myself with colorful apartments? You don't have to follow everyone forever, right? But just keep in mind that when you do, you are looking at someone's highlight reel. What you touched on a little bit in the beginning part of your question was positivity and Instagram. I talk about Microjoys and I say that it is the antidote to toxic positivity. Because a microjoy is simply an ordinary moment of joy that exists regardless of our current circumstance. Toxic positivity, or I call the good vibes only culture, is well intended, but it doesn't leave room for all of the difficult parts of life, right? Life is not good vibes only. Sometimes it's real bad vibes, right? And that's just human. And so I think we have to be mindful when it seems like we're only seeing one story on social media, and using your own discernment to say, is this a space I want to be in? Is this a community I want to follow? So again, it's a lot of discernment. I don't think that in and of itself it's a bad thing. I just think we all have to take personal responsibility when we use it. Thank you for asking. Questions, thoughts, concerns? You just want champagne. I know what this is about.
It seems to me that you've done a tremendous amount of self-work, and you mentioned being in therapy for 15 years. So I was wondering what other modalities, aside from therapy, you've engaged in.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. 15 years. Yeah, I was 30. Bad breakup brought me to Susan. Now it's her naked husband. A lot of books, a lot of the Omega Institute, which is just all kinds of workshops. Yoga and meditation, lots of kinds of philosophy, workshops in Buddhism. Like, there's nothing that I believe is off limits. I think if it sounds interesting, I will engage in it. I am Jewish but have gemstones around my apartment. I will go to your church if you want me to. Like, there are very few things that I wouldn't try, but I think for me it's been a lot of reading, a lot of workshops, a lot of being willing to learn from other people, and often other people that you wouldn't expect. So I don't always hold people's degrees to be very important to me. But what I do think matters to me is your integrity. And so it's a lot of finding the right people, being in spaces with them, reading books. Did that answer your question? 100%. Thank you. Thank you for asking that. Questions?
I don't want to keep score, but this
You have a
side of the
question.
room is winning.
I don't want to keep score, but he is keeping score.
Hi. So I was on my way up to dinner with a friend, and she said she was coming here before dinner, so I said I would come too.
That's a good friend.
I know. I don't know where she is, but
What's
Christine,
her,
if you're
what's her
here-
name?
Christine.
Christine?
Are you here?
Christine's right here. She just
Okay.
got called out, and now she's
I have to make
very
sure
uncomfortable.
She didn't go to dinner without me. It's Ethiopian, and I'm really excited.
Is it Nasab?
Yeah.
soap? The
Yeah,
soap, yeah.
I know. Like, not to be missed, right?
I don't know, because I won't eat anything with my hands if I can't use a fork.
Well,
I'm sure I've heard amazing things. I just need forks.
okay.
I'm not going to be the person in an Ethiopian restaurant using a fork.
I was just thinking maybe I'd bring one for my car. Or
Oh, this is
figure it
getting
out.
weird. I'm
It's getting
sorry.
weird, I know. All right, so you're new to me, and I'm so excited. I have all these books.
So many books
I
you're
bought
buying.
all the books. And
Did
I'm
you
really-
pay for those?
I did.
Excellent.
I
Thank
did.
you.
I paid for the books. But I'm super curious, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you. But what is next for you? I always get curious. Like, here's this step, and like, what when you're looking down the road, and it's being present in this moment and seeing, hey, I also want this, or I'm curious about that. Like, what is catching your eye these days, and where are you headed going forward?
What's your name?
My name's Bailey.
Hi, Bailey. I'm Cyndie. I have no fucking idea. I'm just trying to write a book and talk about it, and I don't know. We want to buy an apartment in the city, maybe buy a little house in Montclair. I have no idea. I'm just debating where we're going to go after this. No, honestly, I really don't know. I don't know. I think what's most important to me right now is spreading the gospel of Microjoys and the ability to hold two things at once, and really getting that in front of as many people as possible. But ask me again in 3 months, and I'm going to have a really solid answer for you, Bailey. Thank you. I'm glad you came. Me too. And I want to hear about your Ethiopian with no fork.
I'll DM you.
Okay, let me know. It's going to be, I've heard amazing things about it. I really have. There's no shade.
It's really good.
See?
I've been there. I was going to ask something similar, but the opposite direction. Hi.
Hello.
Having read do you revisit your other works, things you've written before, and how does that resonate with you now? Like a lot of people, when they'll read something or see their work they did before, they feel differently about it than they did when they wrote it. I'm curious how that affects you.
Thank you for asking that. So I would assume by other works you also mean A Year of Positive Thinking.
Yes, and Dear Grown-Ass Woman.
Well, Dear Grown-Ass Woman still exists. That's just separate from this. That's a community and a platform for women 35 plus. So that will always exist in the world as long as I'm over 35, and I don't guess I'm going to get younger. So A Year of Positive Thinking has sold hundreds of thousands of copies. Everything in that book is still true today. What I say is that when I felt like my world crashed around me, nothing in that book was going to save me. So Microjoys is the nuance that wasn't in A Year of Positive Thinking, right? Joy is not about thinking positively, right? Joy is about, in this case, Microjoys is about how do I create the space to hold grief in one hand and joy in the other at the exact same time. So in many ways, I see Microjoys as an evolution of that, but it's in no way, nothing about that book do I read and go, Cyndie, that was terrible. I do feel that way about some of my Instagram posts, but I just delete them. Thank you for asking that. Question? Did you have a question? Yeah, you know I'm looking at you. Yeah, You sure? Okay, I'm just checking. Questions, thoughts, or concerns?
I have a concern. No,
I knew it. There's always at least one.
I'm Elizabeth. Thank you so much. I'm curious about what you're reading and what other authors inspire you.
Ooh, there's like 12 on the side of our bed. Thank you for asking that. What am I reading right now? Afro Chic. It's a design book. Jen Pasteloff, who was a friend, on Being Human. What's on our table in the living room right now? Do you know?
I don't. They're all just like colored spines to me.
I know. And I genuinely mean this. If you really want to know, when I go home, I'll take a picture and just DM it to you. I read, and the other thing is I read like 19 books at a time, and it will take years to finish most of them. But I'll absolutely share that with you if you're interested.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any more concerns? Trey, you look concerned.
I have no concern.
Are you sure, Chris?
Kim Kardashian.
Kim Okay.
No.
Don't worry, we're not going to start. So this is family over here, and we had a dinner at what was the name of the place we went in Orange?
Village Hall.
Village Hall. Have you all been to Village Hall?
South.
I don't know the difference. They're different?
Yeah,
They're different. South Orange. Village Hall, we went there and got into a very heated conversation about Kim Kardashian. And we're not going to do that now.
Should we do one more question if people
one
have
more.
it? Anybody want to close this out? One good question?
This is more of a comment, I guess. I think that I'm sort of a fortune teller because I see the future because I was, we just came through a very difficult year, very similar to the things that you described. And I realized that because of COVID and everything else, that we had really lost touch with our ability to socialize. And so, without having this Microjoy vocabulary, I thought, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to actually ask people that I admire or admire on Instagram even, but I know in town, to sit down and have coffee with me. And one of the first people that I did that with was Henry.
Oh, look at that.
And in describing what my couple of years was like, he said, wow, you've just described what's in this book that I'm moderating on Thursday. So I also don't know you. I also paid full price for my book.
Hey, all right now.
And so I'm really curious to read it and see how I can continue on.
Thank you so much for coming. What's your name?
John.
John, thank you so much for coming and for sharing that.
So one last question. Oops. Here we go. Wait, is it on?
You say hello,
No. I just said I'm on speaker.
but on the right.
Hello. Okay. So, my question is, what is a microjoy that you've experienced this week yourself? Like, what has brought you that like fuzzy feeling inside?
Yeah, so a microjoy today. Well, this is a microjoy, right? Like everyone here, all of us being in this room together doesn't change the horrific things that are happening in the world. But we still get this moment, right? We still get to talk to strangers, drink champagne that you didn't pay for. Like all of this still happens, right? But I know, feel free to applaud the champagne. And please enjoy more champagne, maybe. Can they enjoy? Nope. Just kidding. No more champagne for all of you, so you'll not be enjoying that tonight. But you can buy some. Not here, though, because it's a bookstore. So this is a microjoy. But also, I was telling Henry earlier, I said, you know, I think I'm not sick, but I said, I just feel like my body is feeling run down from this tour and everything leading up to it. The book has been out in the world for maybe 8 days, 10 days. And then my girlfriend showed up at my house. And I was like, you can come in, but I'm really not feeling well, so I'll let you in, but you gotta work by yourself, you gotta do your own thing. And the second she got there, everything changed. And I was like, well, yeah, so you didn't hear what happened to so-and-so. And everything that I had been feeling, like my body was sort of shutting down, changed instantly. And that's a microjoy, right? When I go home tonight, I'm gonna knock out and I'm gonna feel like crap again. But seeing my friend, you know, and being able to talk to somebody who's like a sister to me, that's a microjoy. Doesn't change what is, but it's a moment of joy that exists regardless of our current circumstance. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for giving us an evening of microjoy. Really appreciate it. Let's give her a hand.